So did the government really mean it when they said we must learn to live with coronavirus and we're going to rely on personal responsibility rather than draconian freedom-restricting laws going forward? I only ask because in a very concerning development, they plan to make domestic vaccine passports the law for large venues like nightclubs and concerts if they fail to implement them on a voluntary basis. Here's what Boris Johnson said about this.
Matter of social responsibility, we're urging nightclubs and other venues with large crowds to make use of the NHS COVID pass, which shows proof of vaccination, a recent negative test, or natural immunity as a means of entry.
So pretty clear what the Prime Minister said. But that's the same Prime Minister who once said of state-mandated ID cards, I will take that card out of my wallet and physically eat it in the presence of whatever emanation of the state has demanded that I produce it. What's changed? It will also be devastating for the events industry, with only 71% of pre-pandemic turnover as a result. That's according to government analysis. That loss wipes out £3.5 billion. But this coronavirus-inspired authoritarianism is disturbingly spreading across the globe. French President Macron last night said the use of compulsory vaccine passports are going to be so extreme that the unjabbed French will be unable to buy food at a shop or ride on a bus. That's coercion, pure and simple. The country's high rate of vaccine hesitancy has seen the president threaten to introduce compulsory vaccines too. Macron said, we must go towards vaccination of all French people. It is the only way towards a normal life. We may need to ask ourselves the question of mandatory vaccination for all. What a disturbing twist that the state might start to control what we put in our bodies. There is no excuse, and politicians across the spectrum must think of the long-term damage they will create with an already distrusting part of the population. But here in the UK, we're not actually facing the same issue as France. This is why I'm so confused. Our vaccine hesitancy is one of the lowest in the world. So it remains truly shocking to me the lack of faith UK governments and much of the media has in the British people to safely live our lives. It will be a complete tragedy for British freedom if one of the legacies from this pandemic is a biosecurity state. But worryingly, that's where we seem to be headed. Nicola Sturgeon is certainly embracing running a COVID nanny state. Even at the so-called level 0, she's damning Scotland's hospitality industry to a midnight curfew.
Let me turn now to the modifications to our indicative plans. Firstly, hospitality venues in level 0 in all parts of Scotland will require to close at midnight. This is a change to what we had previously indicated for level 0, that venues would follow local licensing rules. And this reflects the fact that indoor hospitality, despite the sector's sterling efforts, and I want to pay tribute to those, does remain a relatively risky environment, particularly later at night, when people might be less likely to follow rules. A midnight closing time represents progress from level 1 and level 2, but it will still help to mitigate some of that additional risk.
Sorry, Sturgeon, where's the scientific evidence to back up that decision? Let's be honest, what Sturgeon's essentially telling her citizens is that she doesn't trust them once they've had a drink or two. Oh, and by the way, mask mandates in Scotland are going to continue indefinitely, which I'm sure is absolutely nothing to do with virtue signalling. Opposition to football players taking the knee before every match does not make you racist. Booing the taking of the knee at a football match does not make you racist. You could argue it's impolite, but anyone who actually knows the culture of English football knows booing is part of the spectacle. Priti Patel refused to condemn people booing the taking of the knee, which she branded as gesture politics, in an interview with GBNews at the start of the tournament. Now, listen carefully.
I just don't support, people participating in, that type of gesture politics to a certain extent as well. It's all well to support a cause and, make your voices heard. But actually, quite frankly, and we saw last year in particular with some of the protests that took place, I speak now very much from what I saw in the impact on policing. It was devastating. And not only that, I just don't subscribe to this view that we should be rewriting our history.
Now, my reaction to that is good on the Home Secretary. She understands the nuance behind the gesture, which is divisive at best. But it prompted England player Tyrone Mings to tweet, "You don't get to stoke the fire at the beginning of the tournament by labelling our anti-racism message as gesture politics and then pretend to be disgusted when the very thing we're campaigning against happens." Look, we live in a free society. Mings can say that if he wants, and the England team were completely within their rights to take the knee at the start of the match. But it is equally acceptable for folk to express their disdain. Here's why. For many, the taking of the knee is innately connected with the political arm of the Black Lives Matter organisation. That organisation is campaigning to defund the police and overthrow capitalism. It's right that the Home Secretary is opposed to both of those things. What's sad to me is that we don't see many high-profile footballers and celebrities campaigning against the social media companies, especially Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, which allow these hate crimes to take place on a daily basis. Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.